and welcome to Roger Cormania, my new series chronicling the works of Roger Corman, king of B-movies. So, why dedicate an entire series to just one filmmaker? Because Roger Corman is arguably the greatest filmmaker to ever live, and is certainly among the most influential. Corman began making movies in the 1950s and has continued on to this very day. He's famous for being able to make a whole lot of movie for not a lot of budget, and bears the special distinction of having never lost money on any of his hundreds of projects. Supposedly, Corman doesn't really relish the title King of B-movies, though it certainly fits. He prefers to be thought of as just an efficient, fiscally responsible filmmaker who doesn't need an overblown budget to put out a quality product time after time.
There was a great deal of creativity and thought, imagination went into those creatures. We were limited by our funds and by the techniques available, and sometimes when you're limited, your imagination takes you farther in order to conquer the problem.
If you check out his IMDb page, you'll find 55 director credits and almost 400 producer credits, which doesn't include his countless uncredited roles and all of his work as head of several production companies. To give you an idea of how prolific this guy is, if I did one of these episodes every week with one Corman movie per episode, I could keep going for 9 years. Although his work is firmly within the low-budget realm and mostly confined to exploitation, horror, and science fiction genres, many Corman movies have achieved critical acclaim, and many famous juggernauts of the film industry worked with him early on in their careers.
But I didn't have the money to finish the picture with a union crew, so I only shot the interiors. The exteriors, I had probably half the young directors in town shooting. Francis Coppola shot part of it. Monty Hellman shot part of it. Finally, Jack Nicholson said, look, I can direct as well as any of these guys. I'll finish the picture up. So I said, fine. So Jack went out the last day, directed himself.
All this, and yet most people don't know the name Roger Corman, even if they do know about iconic movies he was involved with, like Little Shop of Horrors, Death Race 2000, The Big Dollhouse, and even modern stuff like Sharktopus. Hence, this series, to spread awareness of a fascinating filmmaker whose influence on cinema spans 6 decades and counting, and to separate the classics that are worth watching today from the movies that are only interesting to B-movie fanatics like myself. Let's start things off today with a selection that exemplifies many common elements of Corman Productions, 1981's Galaxy of Terror. Galaxy of Terror is one of the fancier-looking films from New World Pictures, the production company founded by Roger and his brother Gene Corman in 1970. The movie has earned its cult following by virtue of some very cool visuals, plenty of violence, and an inventive sci-fi story, which all conveniently distract you from the fact that there are less than a dozen actors involved and actually only 3 or 4 different sets. It stars a few recognizable faces, including Joni of Love's Chachi fame, horror and blaxploitation icon Sid Haig, and Ray Walston being his Ray Walstonius. Also helping out is a pre-Nightmare on Elm Street Robert Englund, who actually plays a fairly level-headed, likable character in this film, at least until the part where he goes insane.
I'm setting myself with my own bloody fingernails. Did you know that? Do you even care? Pay for all this. I'm going to stop your sniping at me. I'm going to stop you, Captain. I'm gonna stop you now.
Ranger!
The story takes place in the distant future, as an exploration team is dispatched to investigate a mysterious Geiger-esque planet and gets killed off one by a horrifying extraterrestrial force. If this sounds kind of familiar, it's because it's pretty much just a ripoff of Alien. Speaking of which, the production designer and second unit director for this film was actually none other than
James Cameron, the bravest pioneer.
Yeah, that James Cameron. One cool thing about Corman projects is since the budgets were low, he could afford to take a bit of a gamble on brand new talent, which Cameron pretty much was at the time. Cameron would go on to direct Aliens 5 years after this, and it's not hard to see how elements of this movie worked their way into that one. It's also fun just to see some of his early special effects work. See those maggots there? He invented a method to make them wiggle on command by electrifying the floor. And they say Avatar was a crowning achievement in special effects. Considering the title of the movie, it's not much of a spoiler to tell you that the main subject is fear. as the crewmen explore a mysterious pyramid and are each faced with their own phobias brought to life.
Doubt. His brother demon to despair. The demon's tail doubt withers those who dare not dare.
Now this could be a really interesting character study, as each person is slowly undone by their own flaws and weaknesses. But we spend so little time getting to know the characters that there's practically no suspense involved in their deaths. As soon as any character drops some throwaway line about something they're afraid of, mentions an unpleasant memory, or just expresses a general dislike for something, you can pretty much guess when and how they're gonna die.
I live and I die by the crystals.
I'm not going down in your cavern, it's too tight. I hate myself.
Now, this is not to say that the kills aren't entertaining, as the gore effects are creative and competently done, and the violence and monster scenes are paced well throughout the movie, so it never gets dull. Cool, yes, but actually scary? No. Aside from disembowelments by alien monsters, the movie has some very interesting setting elements that never get their chance to be explored due to the very short 84-minute runtime. For instance, there's this enigmatic master character who apparently wields godlike power and is never really explained, despite driving the entire plot from the background. Who is he? How did he come to rule this Empire of the Stars, and what's the Empire really like? And then there are little things, like in one scene where Robert Englund seems frightened of books.
What's that? Whoa! A real book? No. That's okay.
And what gives? Is he weirded out by how retro paper would be in the future, or does he think it's an antique and he's gonna break it, or what? A lot of questions crop up as you watch this movie, but sadly, the setting is never fleshed out in any satisfactory manner. There are a few other weaknesses, the most obvious being the soundtrack, which is cool, but consists entirely of heavy, brooding synthesizers and some wind. At the time, I'm sure it seemed very futuristic, and it does amp up the tension for the audience in a visceral sort of way, but it's undeniably monotonous. I mean, check out this kind of scene. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm watching a surreal science fiction movie so much as I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog is running out of air. The Foley artistry also comes off as kind of cheap, with several otherwise dramatic scenes that get ruined by silly sound effects. Now, it might be that these sound effects weren't so overused and cliche back in 1981, but to a modern audience, it definitely comes off as cartoonish. In the end, Galaxy of Terror is a very well-crafted movie that you can enjoy in under 90 minutes, but in my opinion, it really begs to have been longer so that we could learn more about the characters, build more suspense, and fill in some interesting details about the setting. Its low budget was spent well on high-quality effects and a good cast, but the movie had to be short to make up for it, relying on quality over quantity. Since it's good, you can't help wishing there were more of it to enjoy. For fans of science fiction and old-school practical effects, Galaxy of Terror is really entertaining. Add to this the fact that it features the early work of Robert Englund and James Cameron, and there's plenty in this cult classic that's worth your time. Next time on Roger Cormania, we'll look at a movie directed by Corman, as well as the most literal interpretation of the term remake in Hollywood history. Thanks for joining me on the first episode. That's one movie down, several hundred left to go. Be seeing you.
I dream of you like a cloud.
I live and I die by the crystals.